Part 1. The Silent Invasion. The floorboards of Sarah's house creaked, each sound a thunderclap in the suffocating silence of the night. My heart hammered a desperate rhythm against my ribs, a manic drum solo accompanying my own slow, agonizing death. I shouldn't have been there. I knew it. But the lie, the sheer callous audacity of her lie had driven me past the point of sanity. "I'm staying with Sarah," she'd said, her voice a soothing, practiced melody over the phone, the same voice that swore an oath of eternal fidelity just 4 years ago. Eternal. What a sick, cosmic joke. My breath hitched as I peered through the condensation on the living room window. The faint glow of a street lamp cut through the darkness. And there it was. Sarah's beat-up Ford Fiesta, a relic of her college days, was parked innocently in her own driveway. But if my wife was with Sarah, why was Sarah's car here, at an empty house? The air in my lungs turned to lead. It wasn't just a hunch anymore. It was a cold, hard certainty that settled like a stone in my gut. My wife, the woman I had nursed back from the brink of death after her transplant, the woman whose hands I had held through every agonizing recovery, was not with her friend. She was with him. With Marcus, the 50-year-old predator from her office, the man who had promised her butterflies and fleeting thrills she claimed I could no longer give. The phone call to my cousin, Sarah's mutual friend, was a final, desperate plea to an indifferent universe. Her calm, clinical confirmation was the bullet. "No, John. Sarah hasn't seen Elena all week. She's out of town." Elena. My wife. The name tasted like ash. I drove away, the engine's rumble a hollow mockery of the rage that was boiling inside me. I was supposed to be closer to my family, wasn't I? That was her main complaint. Now, my family was the only thing standing between me and a complete psychological collapse. I sought refuge in a nameless, signal-less forest, a pathetic attempt to outrun the digital trail of her betrayal. When I returned, the phone screen was a gallery of her manufactured fury. "How dare you spy on me? What kind of man are you?" The sheer audacity of her moral outrage, a masterful deflection, a shield made of lies. She was angry at me for finding out she was cheating. The world had officially tilted on its axis. But the real shock came days later when I confronted her. She admitted to being with him, but the lie twisted again, mutating into a new, insidious form. We stayed in a hostel. Nothing more than kissing, I swear. Kissing. Like a schoolgirl's harmless transgression. She looked me straight in the eye, her pale blue eyes, the ones that always melted my resolve, now cold, calculating. She was a post-transplant patient, a woman who lived with a precarious fragility, a fact that had always made my anger dissolve into protective concern. But now that fragility felt like a weapon. I moved out, needing space, a chasm to breathe in. I gave her another chance, a week of strained silence and false hope. And she still slept with him again. It was late June when I finally ended it. "I slept with him last week," she confessed, the words flat, devoid of remorse, as if reporting the weather. That was it. The final, irreparable tear in the tapestry of our 8 years. The setup. But my retreat wasn't freedom. It was merely a repositioning. We still co-owned the house, that 5-figure anchor chaining us together. And then there was the visa. Her spouse visa. She was Russian, living in the UK, and her right to stay was entirely dependent on me. The visa required a renewal application in 6 months, not a year, making the impending separation a ticking time bomb. I was trapped. Not by law, but by my own disastrously honorable code. I had promised not to spite her, not to punish her. A man of my word. A stupid, suicidal man of his word. And then the ultimate move. The emotional pincer attack. In late July, she reappeared. Not as a contrite partner, but as a terrified victim. "I keep thinking of you, John. Can we try again?" A week later, the true threat emerged. If I have to go back to Russia, I can't live with that. I'll end it all. Suicide. The single paralyzing word that turned my moral duty into a deadly, inescapable prison. I still loved her. But I was shackled to a ghost, an emotional blackmailer, a woman who had opened Pandora's box and was now demanding I help her close it. The trap had sprung. Part 2. The Unholy Alliance. The air in the solicitor's office was thick with the dust of forgotten laws and broken promises. I sat opposite the stern-faced immigration lawyer, Mr. Henderson, the man whose every utterance cost more than I cared to calculate. I was there under false pretenses. I told Elena I was fighting for us, for the 6-month extension. But the truth was a venomous secret coiled in my gut. I was seeking a loophole, an exit door for me. The spouse visa requires your continued genuine commitment, Mr. Henderson's voice droned, his eyes clinical. Any pending divorce or separation will be grounds for refusal. Her options are extremely limited. He then listed them: work visa unlikely, student visa expensive, unfeasible, or independent status under domestic violence rules. A long shot, but it offers a path to settlement for those whose relationship ends due to abuse. Domestic violence. The words tasted vile. I had never laid a hand on her. Yet, the emotional cage she'd built around me, the suicide threats, the guilt-tripping using her health, was a form of psychological torture. Could emotional abuse be domestic violence? Henderson was skeptical, but allowed for a narrow possibility. Proof of extreme, coercive control, or an environment so toxic it constituted abuse. The impossible task crystallized. I had to gather evidence of her manipulative behavior, her psychological abuse, and twist it into a narrative that would qualify her for independence. The irony was a bitter cocktail of genius and depravity. I had to become the villain to set myself free, all while pretending to be the devoted, long-suffering husband. My only tool was the lie, the same weapon she had used on me. I moved back into the marital home, a voluntary prisoner. Every shared meal was a performance, every touch a lie. The house was no longer a home. It was a stage for a toxic play called reconciliation. Her anxiety was a tangible thing, a cold fog in the air. "Are you sure you still want me here, John?" she'd ask, her eyes darting to the door, a masterclass in feigned vulnerability. I'd kiss her forehead, a Judas kiss, and reassure her. "Of course, Elena. I made a commitment. We'll get through this." Commitment. That word had lost all meaning. Our life became a cycle of manufactured intimacy and silent, psychological warfare. I began my collection, recording phone calls where she subtly threatened to disappear or accidentally forget to take the anti-rejection meds if I left her alone, logging her paranoid jealousy over my childhood female friends, documenting the way she'd use her fragile post-transplant health as a rhetorical shield in every argument. It was sickening. I was compiling a case against the woman I still, tragically, loved. The Marcus factor. The true bitterness of the situation was Marcus. I discovered through a mutual contact that he hadn't left his wife and daughters. He had used Elena for a quick, cheap thrill and then cut her off with cold professional efficiency. She wasn't just a cheat. She was a victim of a calculating manipulator, sacrificed her marriage for a fantasy that evaporated into thin air. "He said I was too much drama," she tearfully confided one night, unaware of the grim irony. Her rejection was my ammunition. It fueled a new kind of contempt, not just for her actions, but for her tragic, reckless stupidity. I had supported her through life and death crises. Marcus gave her butterflies, and then a brutal dose of reality. The revelation hardened my resolve. I wasn't just escaping. I was engineering a rescue for a blind, self-destructive soul. My goal shifted from mere survival to a bitter, twisted form of redemption. I would grant her freedom from me, even if it cost me my soul. The only way out of the trap was to build a bigger, better trap that would spring us both free. Part 3. The tape recorder's truth. The digital recorder, hidden inside a hollowed-out paperback copy of The Great Gatsby, was my new constant companion. It was my silent witness, my confessor, the only entity in the house that knew the truth of my waking nightmare. I called it Nick, after the novel's unreliable narrator. And Nick was documenting the disintegration of a life. The worst recordings were the quiet ones. One evening, after a forced, tension-filled dinner, Elena was staring out the window, a statue carved from despair. "It's just the thought of being back there, John." Her voice was a near whisper, laced with manufactured resignation. "My mother's cancer, the political climate. It's all too much. I won't survive. They'll just find me in the bathtub." The ambiguity was the poison. Was it a genuine cry for help, or a calculated strike? I had to assume the latter. I responded with a forced calm that tasted like bile. "Elena, you know I won't let that happen. We'll figure out the visa. I'm taking care of it." Nick captured the entire exchange. The manipulation, my panicked reassurance, the tightrope walk of my sanity. The lawyers needed hard proof of the suicide threat as a form of coercive control. I had to push her subtly, without breaking my promise to honor the visa. I needed her to verbalize the condition of her survival. My desperation led to a catastrophic mistake. I tried to manufacture a scene. I gently broached the subject of selling the house, just testing the waters. "It's too big for you alone, Elena. Maybe we could rent it out or—" I didn't get to finish. She exploded, a sudden, terrifying shift from victim to predator. "The house. You want to take the house too? After everything I've been through? The transplant? The back surgery? You'd really leave me with nothing? No home, no visa, no life." Her voice cracked, a perfect symphony of accusation and self-pity. She backed me against the kitchen counter, her eyes blazing, and then the final shocking move. She picked up the closest object, a heavy porcelain mug, and hurled it, not at me, but past me, smashing against the wall just inches from my head. The shattering ceramic was the sound of my sanity breaking. I flinched, not from fear of the mug, but from the realization of how close I was to losing control. Nick was recording the whole thing. The sound of the smash, the torrent of her accusations, the gaslighting, the weaponization of her illness. It was a terrifying, perfect piece of evidence. But it came at a terrible cost. For the first time, I felt a genuine, gut-wrenching fear of her, not just pity. She wasn't just a lost, reckless soul. She was dangerous. I stared at the fragments of porcelain, then at her, her face already contorted back into the mask of the fragile, contrite wife. "I'm so sorry, John. I panic when I think of being alone." The words were rehearsed, the tears now flowing freely. And I, the trapped fool, had to play my part. I held her, stroking her hair, my body rigid with disgust and a sick, secret triumph. "It's okay, Elena. It's okay." I was comforting my captor. But Nick had what we needed. Part 4. The Immigration Gambit. The solicitor, Mr. Henderson, listened to the recording in stoic silence. His face, usually a mask of professional disinterest, showed a flicker of something. Disgust? Pity? When the shattering sound of the mug echoed in his sterile office, he finally spoke. "Coercive control," he stated, his voice low and firm. "The pattern is clear. Her threats of self-harm, linked directly to her fear of losing her financial security and, crucially, her legal status, it constitutes abuse. She is using her fragility and your commitment against you." The irony was overwhelming. I was proving she was an abuser, to save her from deportation, to save myself from her moral blackmail. Henderson confirmed the next steps. I had to file the application for the independent status visa on the grounds of domestic violence immediately. But the biggest obstacle was still the reconciliation charade. If the Home Office interviewed her and she confirmed we were happily working on our marriage, the application would fail, and she'd lose everything. I had to plant the idea in her mind that I was the one trying to secure her future by any means necessary, including a desperate, preemptive application. "Elena," I said that night, sitting beside her on the couch, the phantom sound of breaking porcelain still ringing in my ears. I went back to the solicitor. "Things are moving fast." He said the only way to safeguard your future, given your health and the political situation back home, is to make sure you have the right to stay, even if we don't work out. It's an insurance policy. I presented the independent visa as a complex legal maneuver, a last-ditch effort to keep her safe. She was hesitant. "But that makes it sound like we're divorcing, John. You said we were trying." This was the crux. I had to lie to save her, and the lie had to be airtight. It's the UK government, Elena. They need paperwork. It's a formality that protects your legal position if the marriage application is delayed or rejected for any reason. We are trying. This just makes sure you don't end up on a plane to Moscow if they decide my paperwork is wrong. You're vulnerable, you need this protection. I played the role of the devoted protector to perfection, manipulating her fear of bureaucracy and deportation. The truth that this visa was her ticket to freedom from me remained unspoken. She finally agreed, her relief outweighing her suspicion. The application went in, complete with a terrifying edited transcript of the Nick recordings, painting a picture of a man driven to his limits by his wife's coercive, self-harm-laced threats. I was officially a co-conspirator in my own character assassination. The waiting period was torture. Every knock on the door, every email notification, felt like the arrival of my judgment. Meanwhile, I had to maintain the charade. We had a joint house viewing, a lie, a setup. We went to a friend's dinner party, more lying. We even discussed adopting a new pet, a sickening symbol of a future I knew would never exist. I was a ghost, haunting my own life. But the 6-month deadline was closing in. The countdown to her interview, the moment of truth, had begun. Part 5. The final face OFF. The day of the interview dawned cold and gray, matching the climate in our house. Elena was a nervous wreck. She clutched the folder of legal documents, her hands trembling so violently that the paper rattled. "What if they ask about the cheating, John? What if they call you? You said they wouldn't." I was a maestro of calm deceit. "They won't, Elena. This is about your safety. Remember the script. I'm doing this because I can't bear the thought of you suffering, that your health is too fragile for me to take risks with your status." The lie was perfect, a velvet cage. I drove her to the Home Office, a fortress of bureaucracy that held the key to both our futures. I waited in the car, watching the clock hand crawl. Every minute was a year. I replayed the whole tragic drama in my head. My unconditional support during her life-threatening transplant, the shared joy that had somehow curdled into this toxic codependence, her ruthless abandonment of our future for a 50-year-old's fleeting attention, the weaponization of her illness, the suicide threats. I felt an immense paralyzing wave of self-pity. I hadn't been an angel. My closeness to my family had clearly made her feel like an outsider, but I hadn't deserved this. Then a strange thing happened. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "John. It's Marcus." I froze. The coworker. The catalyst for all this destruction. His voice was casual, professional, utterly devoid of emotion. "Listen, I heard through the office grapevine that Elena's been struggling visa-wise. Just calling to make sure you know that. Well, she was pretty clear with everyone that you were holding her back. Financially, professionally. Saying you weren't ambitious enough. Just a heads up. He hung up before I could respond. It was a cold, calculated act of final, casual cruelty. A preemptive strike to poison my reputation. Perhaps out of fear of some workplace fallout. The call was a gift wrapped in garbage. It wasn't about me. It was a final, undeniable proof of Elena's utter recklessness and self-serving narrative. It severed the last fragile thread of doubt. I was doing the right thing. The only thing. An hour and a half later, the door to the home office opened, and Elena emerged. She looked pale, but there was a new, fragile relief in her eyes. She practically ran to the car. It's done, John. I stuck to the story. I told them everything. About my panic attacks, about how I need you to be in the UK because of the meds, and how you're my only support system. I told them you were the one who insisted on this application because you were so worried about my health and safety. She was breathless, triumphant in her deceit. The crucial, terrifying fact remained. She had not confessed to the cheating. She had played the victim, the one in a relationship with a controlling yet protective husband who wouldn't let her leave. She had unknowingly validated my coercive control narrative, believing she was protecting her future through a different kind of lie. Part 6. Bitter victory. 2 weeks of suffocating silence and agonizing waiting passed. Then, the thin, official envelope arrived. I snatched it from the doormat, my hand shaking more than hers ever had. I went straight to the kitchen, ripping it open before she could see. My eyes scanned the cold, bureaucratic language. Application for settlement as a victim of domestic violence. Granted. The words shimmered, a shocking, improbable victory. The impossible task was complete. She had her independence. She was safe. And I was finally free. Elena walked in, her face a question mark. What is it, John? The visa. I held up the letter. Yes, Elena. It's the visa. You're safe. You don't have to go back. Ever. I watched as the relief washed over her, a wave of pure, unfiltered joy. But then, the true consequence of my actions had to be delivered. I sat her down and began to speak, the words calm, measured, devoid of the rage I'd suppressed for months. I did what I promised. I made sure you could stay. But this application was not for the marriage. It was for your independent status. I didn't need to explain the term. The truth hit her with the force of a physical blow. Her eyes widened, the relief replaced by dawning horror. You went through with the divorce, she whispered. No, Elena, I corrected her, the final twist of the knife. I went through with your application as a victim of abuse. The Home Office believes you were coerced and controlled, and that your life was threatened by the instability of the relationship. That's how you got the visa. You are now free from me. Completely. The ultimate irony. She had weaponized her fragility and my honor, and I had used her own actions, her panic, her threats, her lies, to create a legal reality where she was both protected and permanently separated from me. She tried to deny it, to plead, but the words were a tidal wave of accusation and truth. I showed her the NIC transcripts, the evidence of her own manipulative behavior. You are not going back to Russia. You have a right to remain here. But I have my life back. We are divorcing. Immediately. And we will sell the house. Her final outburst was one of pure raw rage, not of a victim, but of a defeated manipulator. She screamed, she cried, she demanded, but her power was gone. The visa was her ultimate priority, and I had delivered it, but with a price she hadn't anticipated. Complete, permanent severance. I left the house for the final time, walking past the spot where the mug had shattered, now only a faint smudge on the wall. I had not punished her out of spite. I had fulfilled my promise to keep her safe while simultaneously freeing myself. It was a bitter, costly, but ultimately profound victory. Justice had been served. The villain was unmasked and exiled to her own independence, and the hero, though scarred, had walked out of his gilded cage, finally able to breathe. The house would be sold, the money split, and the ghost of Elena would become a chapter closed, leaving behind only the cold, hard proof of a life regained. I was free. The visa was her burden now, not mine.